Okay, so this is probably the darkest story I have ever heard of love and obsession. I mean, this man stole her body, took it back to his house, and lived with it for 7 years. This is the story of the true corpse bride in Key West, Florida. So hello my silky friends. It's that time again, another Silky Sunday. How you doing? Did you have a good week? Just a warning, today's story is off the charts. At the end of this video, you're probably going to say, did I even really want to know this? Yes. My answer is yes. Yes, you did. Because you want to tell this crazy story to your friends. You weirdo. I know, I've got some wild hair going on, but that's okay, because I'm about to put on a hat, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, today's tea is passion fruit. This story is extremely passionate. Not necessarily in the best way, but hey, it is what it is. Today's hat. Alright, sorry about the video quality last video. I don't know. I hope this one is better. Whatever. Okay, let us go into Key West, Florida once again. We were just there last week with Robert the doll. This story actually is in a display right next to Robert. And if you thought Robert was crazy, honey, let me tell you, you ain't never heard anything like this. I'm going to start this story differently because it usually starts with the perpetrator, but I don't think that he should get that much credit. So we're going to start the story with our victim, the beautiful Elena DeHoyos. Elena was a beautiful 16-year-old girl living in Florida, and she was known as like the local beauty. If she lived today, she would have like 100,000 followers on, Instagram. But for the day, she, was just the it girl. The culture was a little bit different back then, and Elena got married when she was 16 years old to Luis Mesa. Back in the day, it was expected that you got married and you started a family, and that was about the biggest goal that we had here. This is the late 1920s, so, there weren't a lot of expectations. So Elena and Luis get married, and she gets in the family way, but tragically she miscarries. And that is where her future changed. So he doesn't divorce her. No, he just leaves her. What a winner, right? So here is beautiful Elena, about 17 years old, and she now is husbandless. She moves back into her family home with her mom and her family. And, she's trying to recover from this whole tragedy and the embarrassment. Can you imagine? This hat is itchy. So she starts to develop some medical symptoms, like she's just not feeling good. And she's tired a lot. This was not a wealthy family. They didn't just run to the doctor all the time. So, her symptoms went on for a while, and then she develops this cough that just won't go away. She's not sleeping well. Finally, she starts to cough up some blood. Now, that is a problem. So they decide to go ahead and take her to the doctor. And she goes to the hospital, and, of course, upon presenting with her symptoms, the doctors are pretty sure they know what's wrong with Elena, but they have to have tests to conclusively say this is what it is. So they send Elena down into the basement of the hospital and tell her she needs to have some x-rays. So Elena's walking down these dark stairs, and she comes out to the basement where a faint light is shining through the window on her. And as she looks down, she sees this elderly man and about his, and I say elderly, but he was in his mid-60s, and he's sitting there reading the newspaper. He looks up, he sees the beautiful Elena, their eyes meet, and that is the first time that Carl Tanzler sees the beautiful Elena. This is about the highlight of the story. So now, let's talk about Mr. Tanzler. Carl was a piece of work. That's what he was. He was born in 1877 in Dresden, Germany. Now, Carl, he liked to change his name a lot. In fact, later on, right before he meets Elena, he changes his name to Count Carl van Kossel. That's hard to say. Why didn't he just choose a name like, Count John Doe, something? Bob Smith. I don't know. We don't know a whole lot about his early life in Germany. We do know that he had a sister that emigrated to the United States into Florida. In Germany, he was a straight-up nerd, okay? He studied science, astronomy. These were his hobbies. He liked to build and investigate things. I can't say a whole lot about it. I'm kind of a nerd too. But anyway, he decides to follow his sister in immigration, and he comes to Florida as well. Now, the one thing that Carl had going on for him is he was silky as silky could be. He got here, even though he didn't have a big education and he wasn't a count. He was able to talk and schmooze people. He convinced the doctors in Florida that he had 9 degrees. And of course he was royalty too, don't forget that. Well, he didn't have any of those things. But he did know enough from his private studies that he could con his way into a good situation, which is exactly what he did. So he was hired as a radiologist by the U.S. Marine Hospital. Now, he had been in the States for quite some time because now he's older. In the meantime, Carl was kind of a dreamer. And he later stated that once when he was very young, his aunt, von Kossel, came to him in a vision and showed him this picture of this beautiful girl with dark hair that was his, soulmate, the one that he was supposed to marry. Well, the problem is Carl didn't meet her. So he just goes ahead and he gets married. And he has 2 daughters. Because what else are you going to do? And that is going to be important later on. So, as he's in Florida raising his family, when he is offered this position at the U.S. Marine Hospital, he's just like, see ya, fam. I got to go. So he just leaves them, trots off, starts his new career in his new life as the Count. So, life is kind of lonely then for a weird old man. It's not like he was a prize. Now, not only had Carl convinced them that he had 9 degrees, he said he was a bacteriologist, he was a submarine captain. Yeah, he kind of did it all. Now, one day, Carl is sitting down there in the basement of his radiology lab. He's reading the newspaper, and he hears a noise. Someone is coming down the steps. And here comes the beautiful Elena. And the light shines through the window, and her face lights up, and he recognizes her as the girl of his visions. This is what the aunt has been telling him all these years. She's his soulmate, his only true love. She's still a teenager, Carl, you freak. Oh, did I say the opinions in this video expressed are all mine? That's my disclaimer, because I've got a lot. So anyway, Carl is immediately enraptured, enthralled. It's true love at first sight. He does the x-rays and soon confirms the doctor's diagnosis of tuberculosis. Well, back in those days, TB, it was a death sentence. They didn't have treatments. They basically sent you off to a hospital to die. So Elena's prospects were pretty bad. Now, Carl, because he became obsessed with her, he would give her gifts. He would, treat the family. He was making good money. And the family, they needed it. Elena was sick. She has TB. She's probably dying. And they didn't have the means to get her treatment. So he decides to steal some machinery from the hospital. Yeah, steal it. Take it to Elena's house. He starts treating her there. So being the brilliant scientist that he was, he started hooking her up with electrodes. Like, this is, I'm sure, primitive compared to our modern technology. But he starts, like, infusing her with oxygen through these electrodes. We won't even go into oxygen therapy because he probably had a good idea. But what it did in her case is it just caused her a lot of pain. Elena is now getting worse. This treatment is not working. He is using all of the treatments that he has available and then making up some because he is determined to save her life. She is too beautiful to die, and she is his bride. Now, he asked her to marry him on many occasions, and there is no indication that Elena felt the same way about him. I mean, she's beautiful, she's young. This is Carl. I mean, what a babe, right? But he's helping her family. He's trying to help her. So she is kind of, tolerating it. I mean, she's just doing the best she can to stay alive. Well, first of all, Carl is still married. Yeah. I mean, still got a wife and 2 daughters out there, which he doesn't tell her about. But when he asks her to marry him, she's like, Carl, I cannot. I am still legally married to Louise. And so, that was not going to stop him. So anyway, he keeps on with these treatments. But unfortunately, on October 25th, 1931, Elena passes away. Well, Carl is devastated. He's heartbroken. He doesn't know what to do. The love of his life is now gone. So in her honor, he asks the family if he can build a mausoleum for her. So he has this beautiful place built. They put her body in there. And for the next 2 years, Carl visits her every night. Now, it's not just a sweet remembrance, hey, Elena, I miss you. You were wonderful, whatever. It was him singing to her, talking to her, like having conversations. He even installed a telephone inside the mausoleum so that when he left at night, he could call her. And he said they had conversations. He said she would sing to him, he would sing to her. They had this whole relationship going on. And then one day he decides to look in the casket, and he realizes that her body is deteriorating. Well, that kind of, puts a damper on this thought that she's still alive and they're in this relationship, right? I mean, she's there decomposing. Well, he can't have that. So what he does is he sneaks in there one night. He brings a toy wagon. Yeah, can you imagine like the radio flyer? I don't know what he brought. But he takes her body back to his house, sneaks away, and he has the only key to the mausoleum. Of course, the family's not coming in there lifting up the lid to the casket to see if Elena's body's there. They assume it is. But all of a sudden, he's not visiting her like he was anymore. So, the family probably thought, okay, he's over the obsession. No, it's worse. He takes Elena home, and, now there is a problem. She doesn't look or smell like she used to. Prior to her death, when she started having hair loss and things like that, her mother had taken and kept her hair and made a wig out of Elena's own hair. This was a gift that she gave Mr. Tanzler because of all the things that he had done for the family. This was the parting gift. Here's Elena's hair. I mean, creepy, but whatever. Gee, thanks. Love it. Now, she's at Carl's house. But the problem is, she's falling apart. Literally. He's got to keep her bones together, so he takes... This is going to get gross. I'll just tell you, if you want to skip forward a little bit, by all means do. This story ain't over. He attaches the bones together with the piano wire. Okay, so now he's got, like, the skeleton all together. But there is a problem. Her skin has, fallen off. Now, to replace the skin that is no longer there, he takes silk and he soaks it in wax and plaster of Paris And he, like, smooths it over her face, puts it over her body, kind of makes a living doll out of her. For the inside cavity that is now liquefied, he stuffs her with rags. And then he puts glass eyes, in, because they're no longer there. I mean, it's been 2 years. She ain't in great shape. So anyway, he makes this whole thing out of her corpse. Of course, she still doesn't smell real good. So he has to douse her in a lot of different kinds of perfumes frequently. He also goes to the store. He buys her new clothes. He buys her jewelry. I mean, he's spoiling this corpse. Girl got it made. Sort of. And then, of course, he takes that beautiful wig that her mom made, puts it on her head, and now he gets her a wedding dress, and she is his bride. I don't even know what to say about that. So time passes, and, Carl kind of lives out just a little ways, and so nobody is really noticing a whole lot with him. His neighbors always see him with somebody, but, through the window. But he's not really in a relationship, so it's kind of weird. People talk. Word gets around. Elena's sister hears of these rumors, so she decides to go and just check it out. She's standing outside the house one evening. She's going to go talk to Carl, and through the window, she sees him dancing with somebody. It's very suspicious. So she knocks on the door. And he sees her, and he's like, hey! Yeah, he's not trying to hide Elena. I mean, he's proud. He's so proud. She asks him some questions about Elena and her body and maybe what's going on. Well, he is so deluded that he's proud of what he's done with Elena. He thinks she's beautiful. He's like, oh yes, you come and see what I have done. I have preserved your sister and her beauty. She's my bride. We're happy together. He thought the sister was going to be happy for them both. Sorry I missed the bridal shower and the wedding. Of course, the sister is horrified, and he begins to explain that he has got this contraption outside. It kind of looks like an airship. That's what he called it. His plan was to launch Elena into the stratosphere because he felt like, that was going to reanimate her. I mean, he was playing Dr. Frankenstein with this corpse. Now, I don't know how he thought back in 1930s he was going to launch her into the air and get her back here. And, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing was delusional. So the sister is horrified. I mean, you can imagine she's like, OMG, this man is off his rocker. So she goes to authorities and she tells them the story, and they're like, huh? They go out to Carl's house. Again, he's not hiding anything. They come in, they see Elena, and they're like, okay, excuse me, Mr. Count Von Crazy? You cannot have corpse in your house. Well, he had been living with her for 7 years. I mean, that was his wife. In the meantime, he had made a death mask of Elena that had her actual features on it. And then he made like a copy, like an effigy of Elena. I mean, she was so decomposed, the original. I don't know what he was thinking, but he had kind of a replica of her and a death mask. And they left that with him, and they're like, hey, bud, you go into jail. This ain't legal. So anyway, he gets out, and he's a very smooth talker now, remember. And in his head, he has done nothing wrong. This is his beloved. This is the sign from the heavens and the universe and his aunt that she's supposed to be with him forever. You could hear the crickets chirping, I'm sure. Anyway, Carl goes on trial because, this is some crazy crap right here. And of course, it was a huge media sensation. And this guy is just, professing his love for this corpse. Lo and behold, instead of using an insanity plea, they say, first of all, he's sane. I don't know in what kind of world they decided that he was sane. I mean, you have stuffed a body and you're going to launch it in space and she's your forever love, whatever. Honey, I don't know how you come to that kind of conclusion. But whatever. 1930s Florida, Key West, yeehaw. During the trial, they basically just dismiss it because they say the statute of limitations is over. But Carl, you cannot have your body because he did petition to keep Elena. And they're like, sorry, bud, we're not going to put you in jail, but you can't keep the corpse bride, okay? So Carl just has to make do with his effigy and the death mask that he had made. You know, after all this publicity, the hospitals, they were done. They're like, okay, weirdo, you're fired. Now he's older, and they realize, they've done an investigation. They don't really even know if he's got a degree in anything, which he does not. He has no choice but to go back to his wife. It's now been years. He's like, hey, honey. And she's like, you know what? We'll help take care of you, but you gotta live elsewhere. Like, not here. So his wife and daughters kind of cared for him in his last few years. Finally, when Carl passes away a few years later, they find him clutching on his deathbed the death mask of Elena. Now, here's the unsettling part. Carl was not found for 3 weeks. So, he was probably in a pretty soggy state himself. And there are rumors that he actually gave the effigy to the police and not the actual body of Elena, and that Elena was still with him. I don't know, because they did an autopsy later on. This was not disclosed to the public because he would never have been deemed sane if the public had known this. You can guess what's coming. Elena was his wife in all senses of the word. Unfortunately, he had constructed her so that they could consummate their marriage. That's all I'm going to say. I can't. I mean, you want to know details? It's on the internet. I'm out. I don't know. Would you want to be loved like this? He was obviously insane, and I don't know why they couldn't see that, but supposedly they had the original remains, and the family took Elena and buried her in a very private, undisclosed spot so that she couldn't be disturbed and he would never find her. But in the meantime, in 1930s style, we talked about this a few videos ago, while Elena's out there and she's all, she's a spectacle, they take her to the funeral parlor. They set her out just like they did Hazel Ferris, and they're like, hey, check this out. This is the beloved Elena that's all in the news. And they charged admission. Yes, they charged admission and made money off Elena. Poor girl. She's been through enough. Now she's on public display. Apparently this used to be a thing. You didn't want to die in the 30s, I'm just telling you. Another interesting note is, remember the mausoleum that he had built? Well, he left it there while she was at his house for those 7 years. But after the whole fiasco with they took the body away, he went secretly and blew up the mausoleum. Now, he didn't even want a remembrance. He just dynamited it. And yet, he never went to jail. I don't know. He was some kind of smooth talker. Eventually, she is buried. We don't know where. And Carl passes away. Story is finally over. Some say that they think Elena haunts the funeral parlor. Hopefully she was long gone by then. Okay, so we are finally done with this story of love and obsession. And, it's one of those stories I'm not even sure you want to hear or that I want to tell, but it's so bizarre. I feel like somebody else needs to share in my horror at this whole situation. So there you go. You're welcome. I hope you're enjoying this channel and the stories that I'm doing. Probably going to do some ghost stories in the next week or two because of Halloween coming up. But anyway, comment below. First of all, have you ever heard this story before? Tell me this. Do you think that Carl Tanzler was actually insane? Or was it just an obsession? I mean, do you think that he would be labeled today as clinically insane and unfit to stand trial? Because, you have to be like really way out there to get the insanity plea. He didn't need to use it, but what do you think? What do you think we'd do today in this situation? I mean, I can just imagine it all over social media. I don't know. I've talked so much, I didn't even drink tea. But I hope you have a great week. If you have a story idea, especially Southern stories, that's what I focus on, let me know. Comment below. I just want to hear from you. Did this story turn your stomach or what? In the meantime, remember, my friends, to stay silky.